to state educrats, your kids are not individuals with minds to be taught, hearts to be seasoned, souls to be cultivated. Your children to the public school establishment are simply numbers that guarantee more money from the state and more money from the federal government. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Constitution Corner. Glad to have with me again Alex Newman to talk about the constitutionality of public school. Alex, I'm amazed how many Americans, I guess I shouldn't be how many Americans, haven't really looked at the Constitution or really understood it, but there is really no provision from the Founding Fathers for anything like a public school system in this country. Tell me why not? Why do you think the Founding Fathers absolutely avoided the possibility of a public school system when they were putting together the founding of the country?
Yeah, thank you, Duke. And the reality is most of the founding fathers were primarily homeschooled, and that includes George Washington, and that includes James Madison. And, some of them did have a little bit of supplemental help from private academies or tutors, and, many of them went on to get some college education later, which was totally different than what we have today. But the founding fathers didn't view education as a function or as a role of government. In fact, at the federal level, it was very, very clear. There's not one word about education in the federal Constitution, and the 10th Amendment explicitly then says that if it's not mentioned in here, if it's not authorized in here, it is prohibited. So at the federal level, the founding fathers were crystal clear, no authority for federal involvement in education. But even at the state level, the founding fathers did not view education as a responsibility of government. It's partly because they came from a biblical worldview. Even the biblical Christians among them still usually saw the world through a biblical lens. And the Bible is very clear about the responsibilities of government: punish evil and protect good. And it's very clear about the responsibility of parents: educate your children. So I think that's really why public school didn't really become a thing in the United States until the mid-1800s, and it didn't really catch on nationwide until about 1900. So we did very, very well for hundreds of years without a government indoctrination system, and I think most Americans don't have even the first idea about this history.
No, and now that that we now see, we have all sorts of evidence that demonstrates that homeschool kids are across the board better than their public school counterparts in terms of what they know, how young they know it, how they read, they write, their ability for math and science at the college level. Across the board, homeschool kids are dominating the academic side of education, which is prompting many states and even aspects of the federal government to try to call into question the legitimacy of homeschooling, right? Founding fathers were homeschooled, made no provision in the Constitution for public schools. Public schools have become the norm unconstitutionally. Now government is coming after homeschool. How much more backward can you get? Talk about what's going on in places like Oregon to try to restrict homeschooling.
Yeah, in Oregon, we just got a letter from a concerned mother, and we actually got screenshots of the correspondence where the governor there has signed an executive order saying that no student may unenroll from a government school during this lockdown period. I think they're realizing that, oh my goodness, we're going to lose lots of children. They're just going to unenroll and become homeschoolers, and they're never going to come back. So they've put a ban on that. And the reality is policymakers now are seriously exploring ways to undermine homeschooling. We have the establishment very clearly moving in that direction. The Washington Compost, I call it the Washington Post, just put out a big hit piece saying that this bout of national homeschooling was going to set us back big time. We have Harvard Law School now. We covered this over at Freedom Project Media, coming up with this summit this summer where the two co-organizers, one of them, Harvard law professor, says that we should have a presumptive ban on all homeschooling. The other, a law professor at William and Mary, says parental rights aren't even a thing. He debunks parental rights, says the only reason there's a parent-child relationship is because the government confers that on parents through their paternity and maternity laws. This is the outlook of the establishment, of the educational totalitarians. And I think what they're worried about, Duke, and I saw this when I was living in Sweden until very recently where they banned homeschooling. What they're worried about is if you get children who are not indoctrinated with the viewpoint that the government wants, you could end up in a situation like the boy who pointed out that the emperor has no clothes. Right? It just takes out one kid to raise his hand and say, wait a minute, that emperor's naked. And suddenly everybody looks at it. Wait, he really is naked. And we just needed the courage to say. So they're terrified that this massive growth in the homeschool movement and the Christian school movement might end up kind of putting a crack in the matrix, if you will, and resulting in a problem for moving forward their agenda. So I think we're going to see more of these attacks, and we need to be ready for them.
Mom and Dad America, you have to recognize that to the governors of states, to state legislatures, to state educrats, your kids are not individuals with minds to be taught, hearts to be seasoned, souls to be cultivated. Your children, to the public school establishment, are simply numbers that guarantee more money from the state and more money from the federal government. Your kids are nothing more than tools to get money at the state and federal level. This is not about educating your kids. It's about indoctrinating them. This is not about the value of your children. It's about the value of your children to the pockets of teachers' unions and academic and educratic authoritarians, right? So in the 35 seconds or so that we've got left, give a last comment on the fate of homeschooling if we don't try to protect it.
Yeah, if we don't get serious about this, we're going to end up in the situation that Sweden and Germany ended up in. In Germany, actually, Adolf Hitler became the first leader to ever criminalize parents educating their children. Since then, many totalitarian governments have followed suit. And if we're not careful, we're going to be going down that road as well. We need to be vigilant. We need to fight back. Get involved in your state homeschool association. Get involved politically, because our fundamental God-given human rights are at stake and will be under fire, if not already, very, very soon.
Alex Newman, you know better than anybody. Don't just know your Constitution, live it.
Amen.